The information society? I don't know it.
I'm quite sure most people couldn't care less for whether we live in an information society or in a knowledgeable society or not.
Information. 411. What? 411. Hey, how you doing?
Whatever man's imagination can come up with.
Radio, television?
Every individual must have a number.
The information age is the Xerox machine in my office.
Everybody knows what's happening in every part of the world within seconds. And it's affecting every part of our lives. It's something we can't get away from it. I think we'll have to just, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen.
Good evening. I'm Mark Peratt. And the reason I've produced this show is that when you ask most people what the information society means, they don't know, even though they're intimately involved with it. Most of us believe that the industrial age still dominates American life. But after studying it for 7 years, in my opinion, it no longer does. But this show is not about the end of an era. Rather, it's about the start of a new one. It's about the beginning of a new age, launched by the tremendous force of a revolution. A revolution in communication and information. You know, tools are wonderful things. And sometimes they're extremely important. In fact, there are few instances in history when a tool has come along that was so profoundly important that it altered the path of civilization. It actually created a new age. The first time, about 5,000 years ago, somewhere in the Fertile Crescent, between the Mesopotamian plains and the Nile Valley, the plow was invented. Now that technology was revolutionary. The plow created all the conditions necessary for civilization. Division of labor, private property, law, politics, record keeping, and the tax collector. The plow created the agricultural age. The second time, about 1765, in Glasgow, Scotland, James Watt invented the first practical steam engine. In it, along with mechanization and the assembly line, was another of those extraordinary technologies. Now, this one brought the workers out of the fields and into the factories. The steam engine created the second major stage of civilization, the industrial age. Today, many people believe that information tools are the third technology to change the course of civilization, changing our relationship to nature, to each other, to the very way we experience reality. Of all the information tools, the computer is probably the most powerful. And it's come to stand as a symbol for the information age, just as the steam engine became the symbol for the industrial age.
There are 400,000 computers in this country and about 400,000 more in the rest of the world. That is, there are 800,000 computers all told. Now, that's not counting those little devices which are built into the radar ovens. These are real computers, computers of this kind. The interesting number is that these 400,000 machines do the work of about 5 trillion people, 5 trillion clerical workers. The whole world has only a population of 4 billion people. These machines do the work of 1,000 times more people than the whole world has. Every technology that mankind has ever developed sort of rises sharply and then continues up and eventually sort of flattens out. Now, the technology curve usually is a curve that takes about 70 years. When you think of sailboats or of steamboats or of diesel boats or airplanes, whatever. Computers, we are still down here. We are still down here. We are on our way up to the real phenomenal impact of these machines. That is a future which is marvelous, where knowledge becomes instantaneously available to everybody at a touch of a button.
The velocity of invention and change in the last 50 years has just been mind-boggling. But each generation that comes along takes the last as a given. so I don't see any compression of problems in handling it. Because while I had to learn how to wind a Morton salt box with a coil to build a crystal set, my grandson will have a home computer tied into J.C. Penney's or somebody to order directly from the home. And he will not regard that with any more awe than I regarded the slide rule when they handed it to me in college. So I think each generation learns how to live with a level of technology that the previous one created.
We could spend a whole evening taking a close look at the tools of the Information Society. They're the healthiest and most dynamic part of the U.S. economy today. But I don't want to dwell on the tools. You've seen them on other programs, and the information industries, IBM, AT&T, Xerox, spend millions of dollars telling you how small and cheap and powerful these tools are. But the real story of the Information Society is how they're affecting us. Well, for one thing, there's been a fundamental change in what we do to earn a living. This is a picture of the U.S. workforce going back to 1880. You can clearly see 3 stages of development. Stage 1, the plow, is still the dominant technology. The largest group of workers are farmers, followed by industrial workers and information workers way down here. Stage 2, machines are now the dominant technology. In 1907, the industrial workforce takes the lead from the farmers and keeps it for over 50 years. And now, stage 3, 1957, and from then on, the largest group of workers are information workers. They now make up over 50% of the workforce, and growing. Industry, about 25%. Agriculture, 3.5%. Well, that's the Information Society in numbers. And these numbers mean real changes in our lives. Changes you can see for yourself almost anywhere in America. I searched for a place, a single town, where you could clearly see these 3 stages. A town where the agricultural age had been overtaken by the industrial age, which in turn is now being overtaken by the information age. And I chose Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a city of 58,000 people, and in many ways, a perfect microcosm of America. Lancaster became a productive agricultural community in the early 1700s, soon after it was settled by Dutch, German, Swiss, and English farmers and craftsmen. This is Walter Himmelreich, his wife Jenny, and his son-in-law Bob, descendants of those original immigrants.
I got the ground ready for the showers.
They're part of the 3.5% of the American workforce who provide all our food.
We'll get some spinach pan later on this afternoon.
I'll be out most of the day helping Bob getting that celery in because we have to get it in time.
Okay.
See you.
Bye. Bye then.
Okay, bye.
In the old days, almost everyone in Lancaster, as in all of America, worked the land. Agriculture, land, farming, growing food, defined their consciousness. Farmers, like the Himmelreichs, grew more food than Lancaster needed. They created a substantial surplus, which they shipped to market in Philadelphia. This was the first paved turnpike in America. Built in 1792, it carried that surplus to Philadelphia. And it brought Philadelphia, its goods, its money, and its revolutionary ideas back, including a new British invention, the steam engine. Of course, Lancaster was still in the midst of the agricultural age, but a technological revolution was brewing. Times were changing, and the city fathers knew it. Lancaster had all the right ingredients: the railroad line, the turnpike, coal, water, and a steady, reliable workforce, quick to learn the new manufacturing techniques.
Typical character of the Lancaster County, and although it could not be stereotyped,
nevertheless is the epitome of the Protestant work ethic. Everybody believes that you've got to work and you should work hard. There's probably no greater crime in Lancaster than not giving a full day's work for a full day's pay.
Lancaster's workers were productive and prudent. They saved their money, which gave Lancaster the capital necessary to create industry, big industry. By the end of the Civil War, the industrial society was in full swing, not only here, but in many parts of the United States. At the turn of the century, Lancaster was a booming industrial city. It had the world's largest umbrella factory and the world's second largest silk factory. In 1903, Lancaster's Safety Buggy Works was turning out automobiles, 5 years before Henry Ford's Model T.
When I was a boy, now and then you'd see an automobile coming. Well, that was a great thing to see a car coming, you know, and you'd get up to the fence. They all had fences around the yards then. And this is a great thing to see this coming
Call
along.
all my brothers to come and watch. There's an automobile coming.
You could hear him chucking way up the road already, you know.
Lancaster had changed. There were still farms on the outskirts of town, but industry now defined its consciousness. The industrial age brought a profusion of cheap manufactured goods to Lancaster, sold right here in Mr. Woolworth's first 5 and 10 cent store. Something else was being manufactured by the industrial age: information tools. It was between Lancaster and Harrisburg that the country's first commercial telegraph link was established, and the telephone followed soon after. Lancaster was becoming more and more connected to the rest of America. The people of Lancaster flourished and prospered. Their tastes became sophisticated. Times were great. But then it all came to a screeching halt. The Depression hit hard. Lancaster's industries collapsed. So did its agriculture. The recovery was painfully slow, until World War II came along. Industries began making supplies for the war effort. By the time the war was over, the industrial age was back in high gear. Not the industry of the past. This new industry was modern, efficient, automated. Many Americans think that this is what America is today, an automated, industrialized society. And they're right. But it's something more. In 1946, the Navy electronics plant changed. It was bought by RCA, which started making tubes for television sets. Today, that plant is producing high-powered information technology, television cameras, communication lasers, personal home computers.
Times have changed, however. Now, what do these people do? Well, they're still employed. We have a very low unemployment rate in Lancaster County, so they're doing the work that is needed to become electronics experts, to get into the telecommunications end of things.
The Hamilton Watch Company changed. The old German and Swiss watchmakers kept pace with changing times. Had to. Their jobs depended on it. The Information Society altered everything. It even changed Woolworth's. Their warehouse is now totally computerized. The Information Society has entered the back rooms of the Industrial Society, and sometimes even the boardrooms. Here in Lancaster, the New Holland Farm Machine Company is now owned by Spare Univac, and the Grinnell Steel Foundry is now owned by ITT. The transformations are everywhere. The Lancaster New Era changed. The newsroom is totally computerized. News now comes over a National Electronic Information Network.
I'm very much more in touch with the world now. I think because it's so easy, let's put it that way. And there's so much coming at me all the time. We have cable television here, so as I say, you get it from Philadelphia, you get it from Baltimore, all the different programs. And we have the newspapers, but everything is coming fast from the city.
The old Conestoga National Bank? Well, that's also changed. Now the bank has a computer center which is tied into the National Electronic Funds Transfer System. The Information Society has even changed City Hall. Today, the city government's computers chatter constantly with state and federal computers.
Among Lancaster County's attempts to keep up with the technological advances comes a great deal of information. Our colleges have it, our industries have it. It is plowing in. It's now a trite expression, but we have what is called an information explosion. But we're handling that.
35. 1028, 9, T-Town.
Even the police are now tied to the FBI's computerized National Crime Information System. And the hospital? Changed. The Information Society has connected every doctor and every patient to a national medical information network. This information machine, a CAT scanner, probes a patient's body and brain painlessly, I'm happy to report, without surgery. Quite a benefit. And here in Lancaster, the Office of the Future is about to arrive. The character of Lancaster's entire workforce changed. There are now plenty of white collars mixed in with the blue. And Lancaster is still changing, and changing faster and faster.
At this stage in my life, I wouldn't like to go back and live the way I lived in those days. It was all right for that time. I liked it. But now, having gotten used to all the conveniences and everything, I certainly wouldn't want to go back.
What you've just seen in Lancaster is happening throughout America. And West Germany, England, France, Scandinavia, and Japan are not far behind, maybe even ahead. The Information Society is a global phenomenon. The city, a communication nexus, the central nervous system of the Information Society.
If we are here in New York and you go to the large office buildings, the people in there do produce nothing but information. There are the information flow from the top down and from the bottom to the top. This is all information. There's no one else. People do absolutely nothing. Somebody dictates to a secretary. The secretary puts it down. This is typed. Some goes into the computer. Some comes from the computer. Computer printouts. There's the telephone all the time, and there are conferences. People do nothing but talking and writing and reading and so on.
Today, over 50 million Americans spend almost all their time working with information. But aside from sheer size, what's really the essence of the Information Society? The answer? It has to do with power. In an information society, our society, the difference between success and failure, survival and defeat, between being powerful and powerless, hinges more than ever before on understanding the value and importance of information. How to get it, organize it, protect it, use it, sell it, and not get overwhelmed by it. In an agricultural society, the source of power is land. In an industrial society, the source of power is capital. Where is the power in an information society? Today, the lifeblood of every corporation, its very essence, is information. In the corporate world, information is power. And to see that, we chose a single corporation that could stand as a symbol for them all, Citicorp. Headquartered in New York, Citicorp is a multinational financial institution with assets of $100 billion. It combines the talents of 50,000 information workers in 92 countries around the world. It's what we used to call a bank.
We operate today in a global marketplace. And the streams of electrons that are going around the world today have created a true revolution. And I would remind you that the bloodiest battle of the War of 1812 was fought almost a month after the peace treaty was signed in England because the sailing ship couldn't get here in time, and thousands of people died. Today, if the President of the United States holds a news conference, it shows up in the cross rate on the dollar sterling market in London in less than 60 seconds. So that the front page of the Wall Street Journal is printed by bouncing electrons off a satellite. And so is our general ledger. And so is the computer switch in Bahrain or Hong Kong or London. So we have tied together a database in the world which is capable of telling anybody, anywhere in the world, almost anything immediately.
$43.50 Swiss.
Wird dir wahrscheinlich nicht so toll werden hier. Ich glaube, im Moment kommt nichts Neues raus.
Zurich, 23, Citibank.
This is just one of Citicorp's nerve centers, its foreign exchange room. Each day, it moves $1.5 billion in currencies from 30 different countries.
Basically what we do is we buy and sell currencies against the dollar. We do it both for our own account and for the account of our customers. The key feature here is speed, trying to follow what's going on in the international markets so that we can anticipate and catch trends as they occur.
At Citicorp, nuances, subtle changes in the flow of information are crucial. And that's also true at Exxon, Lloyd's of London, General Motors, Sony. Fortunes are made or lost because of information, or the lack of it.
Okay, one moment. Cable Dresdner, Frankfurt.
Somebody asked me, what in fact do you do? And I realized that I spent most of my time on the phone, and in order to make people think I was professional, I had to figure out what it was I did. So what I realized was that I sat there and I listened. I listened and I transmitted and I analyzed. There's a little bit of detective work. When you hear a little piece of information coming across the Dow Jones tape, and you see a little bit of selling or buying in one of the exchange markets, and you see what's happening in the money markets, you suddenly put them together and you say, damn it, that's what's happening. We are computer-oriented in terms of getting communication and being up to speed. It's as quick as I can move. And I may not be that fast or that slow, but it's as quick as I can move. The rates move more quickly than anybody can follow. It's not a question of minutes or even hours, it's second to second.
It could be there 1 minute, it's a change next minute. You have to get the change in right away. So if you don't, and they get you, then you lose the money.
91.6.
SocGen, New York, dollar Paris, and 22.
Communications. Everything here is dedicated to communication. Every single piece of electronic gear. We try to catch trends, to identify them, to put the information together and come up with what we think will happen in the exchange markets. There is, in fact, an information society, for sure. In fact, the entire foreign exchange market is based on information.
What a bank has for sale is information, and this has always been true. Rothschild made a fortune by owning carrier pigeons that brought the news of the Battle of Waterloo to the city of London. And so he had that information prior to anyone else.
Well, the real question is to what...
Walter Wriston is one of the most powerful men in America. He's part of a vast financial and political information network composed of people like himself from all over the world, in almost constant communication with each other. He also commands an army composed of thousands of CPAs, MBAs, PhDs, attorneys, secretaries, clerks, information workers. Walter Wriston knows the value of information. He knows how to use it. He knows that in the modern corporation, information is power. The corporation isn't the only power center in our society. There's another, the government. The federal government is the most information-intensive organization ever created. It employs 1.5 million information workers, uses 16,000 computers, and consumes 66 billion pieces of paper each year, enough to cover the entire city of Washington, D.C., with a paper blanket 25 sheets thick.
The government not only is in the business of information, you can always say the government is an information industry, because what do the government people do? They push paper. All the paper pushers in the various government departments are knowledge producers or information transmitters.
What does the government do that has turned it into such an enormous user and producer of information? Some people think it does a lot of nothing, but that's hardly fair. Essentially, the government does two things. It provides services, and it makes decisions that affect the lives of 220 million people. And how does it do that? Well, let's look at just one agency, the Department of Health and Human Services. What used to be HEW.
Medicare and Medicaid combined in the Healthcare Financing Administration, we have a few other things as well, it's the third largest agency in the federal government. $45 billion going on 53 next year. Current trends continue, we will be the largest federal agency in 10 years. Bigger than the Defense Department, bigger than HEW. There's nothing growing as fast as healthcare. And we are perceived as the epitome of a fat, self-satisfied bureaucracy. Right? 46 million beneficiaries. We are not simply buying one yellow pencil for every American. What we're trying to do is serve the most vulnerable among our population. There is no way that I can talk to 46 million Americans. There's no way I should. We've got to have these tapes because they represent all those people. If we didn't have the advanced technology we have now in this country, we couldn't provide those services. And those very vulnerable people would not get the kind of health care this country can afford and is willing to give them.
What Mr. Schaefer is talking about is only one part of the agency. Here's another, the Social Security Administration. Its headquarters alone include 19,000 information workers, 500,000 reels of computer tape, and over 1 million reels of microfilm, all there to meet the demands that we make on our government for services.
Each one of these forms that we handle is a person, really, and they have to have this material. You wouldn't want your mother or your wife or yourself to be waiting 6 or 7 months for something that, no one really cares about except for you. So we just try to treat everything as it's an individual we're dealing with, which it is in actuality.
A tough job, one that never makes the headlines, unless, of course, something goes wrong. But the government does something other than provide services. It makes decisions. And when it comes to decision-making, all branches of government, including the unofficial branches, lobbyists and journalists, live by the same basic law. Information is power. And that information can be either a tool or a weapon, depending on who uses it and with what motive.
The propaganda base has grown considerably more quickly than the actual information base, in my judgment. Many more people are now active in the field in terms of stating positions. And there are many more organized lobby groups in Washington which seeking to affect senatorial judgment and senatorial decisions.
What I'm most familiar with is government. And in government, the side that is afraid that it will lose the argument will try to delay a decision with the argument that there is some more information that needs to be produced. So information can serve a bureaucratic purpose in procrastination, and if you can't get your way, at least preventing somebody else from getting his way.
The pathology of the information society, the most obvious syndrome, is big bureaucracy, both public and private. Everyone complains about it.
I have an personal expression with bureaucracy. Bureaucracy's twiddly-dee, twiddly-do, and twiddly-do nothing.
The inability to get things done. Just red tape.
Big business.
We have personnel forms, merchandising forms, buying forms, forms to get merchandise in and out our corporation, forms to pay our people, forms to make forms.
It's the factory of information.
You want vacations, you have to have vacation request forms. If you want correction of pay, you got to have a form for that. If you want to get hired, you got to have a form for that. If you want to get fired, you got to have a form for that.
Paperwork is killing everybody.
You may walk in here 10 years from now and forms may be up to the ceiling.
Well, there's no question that if you stop the person on the street and say government, they're going to say bureaucrat. And you say, what bureaucrat? And they say someone who's inept, doesn't know how to get things done, who loves paper, who loves confusion, who can't answer a simple letter clearly. And that's widely shared, and it's growing worse. The attitudes are leading to a shattering loss of confidence, which may be one of the most important and serious problems of fallout effects of our current information society.
I have been working with the United States government more or less closely since 1950. When we first went to work with them, they were really great. Say the president and the department head got together to put up a new building. About 30 months later on, 2.5 years, you'd walk into that building. Today it takes like 10 years. So 10 years means there's no fun in it. Who cares?
One does not feel some failure in yourself for having not made a decision, because you are comforted within the bureaucracy that you needn't make that decision. So it's a blanket. It's a Linus-like blanket bureaucracy that protects you. It is a protective covering.
The U.S. is increasingly operating like a Latin American government, which had the problem of this kind of red tape, or actually, to be fair, more like an Egyptian or an Italian government. Latin American governments are actually much better than that.
The concerns about environment and the concerns about safety, which we have all demanded, have placed increasingly on government agencies responsibilities of oversight and concern that weren't there 20, 30 years ago. These are not simple trade-offs. Does that mean the government should get out of the business of environmental concerns, or get out of the business of personal health and safety, or get out of the business of human rights?
Obviously not. You see, the problem is larger than our discontent with our bureaucracies. The problem is that our institutions are often paralyzed by too much paperwork, regulation, red tape. And that part of the information society can be terribly demoralizing. And there's another reason for this feeling, this malaise. And it too involves the information society. It is, ironically, that we're too well informed. We know too much. We've lost forever the opportunity to live in innocence about how our society works, or doesn't work.
It's very difficult for people to live by the old myths about how institutions really work and how politics really work, or how people, just as individuals, really work, in an age of such open and intensive information as we now have. Because if you really know how decisions are made and people's weaknesses as individuals, if you know about their medical problems, their sexual problems, about the way they lead their lives, the old false facades by which we govern Victorian society, or the days of the early republic, where a very small number of people really knew what was going on, but generally people didn't know, it just isn't possible anymore. So the crisis of institutions, in part, is a crisis of information about how they really work being broadly disseminated to the masses in societies.
Information is a tremendously valuable and costly resource. The question is, how effectively do our leaders and institutions use that resource?
The more information we have, the less people understand about the kind of world we live in and the choices that are available to them. So there's obviously a perversion in the use of information. There's obviously a perverted growth in the giantism of institutions.
I think the decision maker has to be able to digest the information that comes to him or to her, and then be prepared to be bold, to take risks, to move in some direction, to make mistakes, to fall down, to get back up, brush yourself off, move forward. I think we're missing that today. That's my sense of some minor crisis of leadership. And I think in some measure it is a sense of the need to have information that makes us indecisive today.
If you are a decision maker, you must be willing to stake yourself on your judgment. In the final analysis, you're alone. In the final analysis, you have to judge, and it gets awfully still around you when you do that. But also, I always found that in those critical moments, there was a certain serenity attached to it, because fretting did you no good at all. And if you don't have the capacity to put what might have been out of your mind, high positions will destroy you.
Welcome back. So where are we? We've seen how the information society is transforming America, and how the power centers are critically dependent on information. But every revolution produces both benefits and problems. And the information revolution is no exception. Problem number one, invasion of privacy. You've all heard about it, maybe even experienced it.
I'm storing information on people, their lives, their activities from day to day, even things that they don't realize. Parking illegally, barking dogs, their names come up.
Privacy, alone.
Everybody knows what everybody does, which isn't very nice.
There's just so much information around, there's no really privacy that exists in today's society.
The problem in a nutshell is this. A lot of people have access to information about you. Information which may or may not be accurate. And they're using that information to make judgments about you in ways that could be damaging. And you know, we didn't really have the issue of privacy to worry about until the information society came along. But now, privacy has become a big issue.
We founded the United States with certain very clear notions about the private life versus the life that was fought and engaged in the public arenas. Well, that worked for about 150, 170 years, essentially because the tools of intrusion were so crude, and because you couldn't get into somebody's brain, and you couldn't look through the walls, you couldn't take the sound from a rowboat in the middle of the lake, there was a fit between our theory about the importance of the private life and the private arena and the existential world of intrusion. Privacy has become the word we use for a set of problems in the relationships of powerful organizations to people for which we don't have another word. It's not equality, it's not free speech, it's not quite what we're used to when we use the word liberty. So for want of a better term, privacy has become the key word that means how are large organizations using the power of information technology over people.
For most people, they experience the invasion of privacy in the form of junk mail or junk phone calls or threats to credit rating, which still are on the margins of their life. But supposing our political freedoms begin to be interfered with, as things are going, that could happen. And if that does happen, these information banks, these profiles of people, this completeness of documentation of everybody's life is a fearful potential threat. Information is the bloodstream of bureaucracy. It's the nerve center of bureaucracy. The thing that has saved us up to now is that the bureaucracies haven't been that efficient. Now, with this new information, they have a mechanism of control. That is what information is used for. The question arises, who is the information for? I think one of the things that causes people to feel uneasy is a feeling that the information is for everybody but the public, for everybody but the consumer, for every special interest, but not for the general interest, not for me, not for you, not for the people down the block, but for institutions to do their number. And their number is a number that is often is not done on me.
As I see it, the privacy issue brings up a real conflict in values. As concerned as we are about privacy, we also want the benefits of the information society. Instant reservations, instant credit, instant medical information. And that poses a contradiction. For example, a perfect crime information system, one that really works, perfectly robs everyone of their privacy, not just criminals. It looks to me as though we may have to give up some of our privacy in exchange for the fast, accurate personal attention we've come to demand. Whether that's a fair trade is for you to judge. All right, problem number 2, one you may be feeling right now. Information overload. There's obviously been an information explosion in this country. There are more people than ever generating more and more information using newer and faster tools that process and transmit the stuff in overwhelming quantity. We seem to have lost our discipline, if we ever had it, for knowing when information is useful and valuable and when it's useless. Bureaucracies are definitely part of the problem. They seem to instinctively require information, whether they need it or not. And the media are also part of the problem. The quantity of information they produce, enormous. The quality, dubious. What's the result of this bombardment? We feel confused, frustrated, resentful, alienated, overloaded. We turn off. T.S. Eliot wrote something right to the point. Where's the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where's the knowledge we have lost in information?
Wisdom is to have very good judgment and a sense of the larger issues. Knowledge says, tells you how to build a bridge. Wisdom says, do you want a bridge there?
If you have a machine that can store billions of bits of information on a real-time basis, the temptation of management's learning to operate in an alien philosophy, which we're now in, is to confuse all of that data for information. And the more skilled the technician, the more they want to lay on you. So that the struggle of management is to attempt to get information which means something, as opposed to a vast printouts of data that tells you really more than you ought to know.
The process, the kind of mind needed to accumulate data, and the kind of mind needed to interpret it and understand its meaning are different kinds of minds. So that you don't have an increase in efficiency or in humanity simply because you have an increase in the amount of information that's available. In fact, you probably have a net loss.
With all the information available, there's the danger that you finally become dependent on the briefer, the man who can package it for you in a way that is comprehensible. And the briefer, in turn, may have more the qualities of an actor than of a thinker. And anybody who's ever studied a subject seriously knows that the first thing that comes to your mind is almost always wrong, even though it sounds plausible. And yet, when you are overwhelmed with so much information, you usually act, or you're tempted to act on the first thing that you think you understood. So I would say, one, we have to live with it. Second, it is I look at it as an opportunity. You're always better off knowing something than not knowing it. Third, it puts a special obligation on leaders and decision makers to explain what they're really doing.
Assuming that the leaders themselves know what they're doing. If they don't, we certainly don't. The last person who did know everything, or so it was said, was a 19th century English philosopher, economist, linguist, botanist, theologist, chemist, historian, and feminist, John Stuart Mill. But we may never again have a John Stuart Mill, for one reason. This machine, right now, contains too much information for this machine to absorb. Could it be, as some people hope, that computers are somehow the answer to information overload? I personally don't think so. Because what computers really do is organize information. And you see, knowledge is information that has been distilled and then understood, not by a machine, but by a far more complex instrument, the thinking and feeling human being. So there's the problem. There's just too much information, good information, around. And by necessity, we've become narrow specialists in a world which, I feel, desperately needs generalists.
We glorify the expert today, and we think we can't move unless there's some expert information available. We've given up on the generalist. So this desire for expertise in making decisions means that we have to satisfy ourselves that there are sufficient papers. I happen to believe in the generalist. I think you need people who are well-versed and have some excellence in areas, but I don't think that you have to be so advised to the nth degree of the expert or from the expert that you can't move.
The increase in the flow of new knowledge, in the flow of information, has made it practically impossible for anyone to keep up with his own field. I am an economist and have been so for 55 years, but I can now no longer see what's going on in my own field. The number of journals, the number of articles in the journals has increased so immensely that it is out of the question that I can read all the stuff that's published.
And perhaps the information society requires a new kind of person. Someone who refuses to be overwhelmed by bureaucratic nonsense. Someone who knows not only how to get information, but also how to select what's valuable. Unfortunately, some of us seem to be going in exactly the opposite direction. And that brings us to problem number 3. The information poor. Today, 1 out of 5 adult Americans is lacking the most basic information skills. 1 out of 5 of us is in real trouble in the information society.
One has now the view that the class structure is divided as between those who have information and those who do not, those who have access to information and those who must function out of ignorance. I made this argument 20 years ago in the Affluent Society, arguing, the term was not original with me, that there was developing a new class in all of the democratic societies, which had its power as the result of its access not to money, not to property, but to knowledge. And this I believe to be the case. And I think there is a class division in modern society as between people who have access to information, access to knowledge, and those who do not. This is the reason why we have a certain angry reference to elites from time to time. This was, I suppose, part of the reason why Spiro Agnew, a man who no one would accuse of being excessively informed, expressed himself so angrily about the snobbish elites. It's not something to be accepted as inevitable, because it is a form of class distinction that can be eliminated by education, and I would suppose is part of the great modern case for more and better and more egalitarian educational opportunity.
If you look at society as simply the collective contribution of millions of human beings who carry in themselves certain power and influence and emotion, and every time you turn the switch off of one of those persons, you've dampened the glow. We cannot afford to increasingly see society controlled by a smaller and smaller group who deal with narrower and narrower specializations, because we not only distort and limit, we caricature what you might, in almost a spiritual sense, see the total beauty of the total contribution. So I see this not only as a matter of being kind to someone else in a kind of self-serving, sentimental way. It's the fundamental question of whether this society is going to find a way to make itself as rich and as powerful, and if you will, as beautiful as potentially it can be.
If every revolution divides society into the haves and the have-nots, the information revolution is also dividing us into two classes: the information rich and the information poor. And that's really too bad, because to be information rich, you don't need strength or land or capital or to be white or male. All you need is your mind. And problem number 4, future shock. The struggle we all experience trying to keep up with this incredibly rapid change.
My grandfather, who was born in 1872, lived for the first 50 years of his life, quite literally, with very little, if any, demands to change. The assumptions by which he lived, life was essentially stable. The increments of change demanded of him were very slow and very moderate. Now it's almost a daily leap, where we discover new terms, new breakthroughs, and I think there may be something psychological, perhaps even biological, that recoils from this and says, no, not anymore. I'm sorry. I'm getting off this merry-go-round. It's going at a whirl that I can't adjust to. Now that's a hazard, and I don't think we've really tested that, because I doubt that society has gone through such dramatic escalations at such pace. But we may be testing the outer limits of the individual as well as the collective response to conditions that go faster than our emotions and maybe even our physical systems are willing to tolerate. In which case we're going to see ourselves, I think, fly apart, because the world that we've created will keep tumbling along, driven by specialists, while the rest of us pull back and say, no, we're not going to go along. And I think the end result would be probably enslavement.
Enslavement? Is that where the information society is taking us? No, I don't think so. The previous age, the industrial age, just happened to us, for better and for worse. We did little or nothing to foresee its dangers, and we're still paying for that lack of awareness. Can we do any better this time? Well, maybe so. After all, the essential tools and skills of the information society can show us what choices we have. And that will allow us to do something we've never done before: consciously shape our destiny.
Part of the challenge of the 80s and the 90s and the year 2000 and on is to take the information we have, make it manageable, and be able to function with some degree of security with all that information.
Information is power, especially in the sense that it is available for those who are already powerful. And the great problem, one of the great problems I think we face, is that we don't know how to deliberately, as a society, move that power to the people who are powerless or who need more power to get fairness, equity, justice, and to redistribute the opportunities to make decisions in the society.
and watch the kids. Look at the little games that kids now have. They play football on a little machine, and they have little tanks that now go around, and, you know, watch that. That's where it's going to start. Those kids are not afraid of computers. They'll use advanced technology. It will enrich their lives. They'll understand about the world. They won't just listen.
I've been in the public opinion field for 3 decades. I've read and examined millions of statistics and gone through hundreds and thousands of interviews with cross-sections of Americans. And that experience has deepened my belief in democracy. You could say that a person who's lived the way I have with people who sometimes are poorly informed and sometimes have foolish views would have made me into a cynic on the subject of democracy. On the contrary, it's given me a lot more confidence in the judgment of the American people than in the direction of our institutions.
I suppose my gutsy response is to be romantic about an earlier period when things were slow. I can have fun recalling my early days when the only magazine that came into our house was National Geographic. I grabbed it and read it from cover to cover. We played radio. We didn't listen to radio. We had no TV. That seemed, in my memory bank, a kind of innocent, satisfying world. But intellectually, I know it's not for me. When I put aside my sentiment and come to my intellectual interpretation, I say this is a magnificent world.